Something changed 48 hours ago. You felt it. You may not have had the language for what moved through you, but your body registered it before your mind caught up. A wave of heat behind your ribs. A dream that woke you at an hour you never wake. A thought about him that arrived with such force it stopped you mid-step, mid-breath, mid-sentence. And beneath all of it, a knowing, not a hope, not a wish, but a knowing that something in the invisible architecture of your connection crossed a threshold it cannot uncross. That was not random. That was not nostalgia replaying old footage behind your eyes. That was the moment something broke through a wall that has been standing between you and this man for longer than either of you realize. And what broke through is love, the kind that does not ask for permission, the kind that moves on its own timetable, the kind that has been building pressure in the hidden structure of your bond until 48 hours ago, when the structure finally could no longer hold it. This message carries urgency, not the kind that demands panic, but the kind that asks you to pay attention, close, honest, unflinching attention, because what shifted is still shifting, and the coming days matter more than your logical mind can calculate. You are standing inside a window, not a permanent opening, not a deadline in the punishing sense, but a window of heightened awareness where what you understand about this connection and what you choose to do with that understanding will shape the next chapter in ways that surprise you. If you have felt something stirring, something you could not name, something that arrived without invitation and refused to leave, then what I am about to walk you through will give that feeling a framework, a meaning, and a direction. But I need to be honest with you about something first. There is a complication inside this shift, not a complication that destroys hope, a complication that explains why the shift happened the way it did, why it came through his silence rather than his words, and why what you are about to hear may challenge something you have been telling yourself for weeks. The complication is actually the reason this shift is trustworthy, and when you understand why, it will change how you read every signal moving forward. Stay. Even if part of you wants to guard yourself against hoping again, especially then. What comes next was not designed for the version of you that has given up. It was designed for the version of you that refused to, even when she could not explain why. When you feel ready, type the words, "I felt the shift" in the comments as a way to honor what moved through you. That acknowledgement is not small. It tells the universe you are paying attention to what the universe is telling you. Now let me explain what actually happened. Carl Jung spent decades mapping a territory most scientists refused to enter. He called it the Psychoid realm, the borderland where the psychological and the spiritual are not separate systems, but one continuous field. In this realm, an emotion is not just a feeling locked inside a single brain. It is an event. It has weight. It has direction. It creates ripples that travel through channels the rational mind cannot trace, but the body registers without hesitation. And 48 hours ago, an event occurred in the psychoid dimension of your connection with this man that has already begun to alter the trajectory of what comes next. You need to understand what a psychoid event actually is, because without that understanding, you will dismiss what you felt as imagination. And that dismissal is the single most dangerous thing you could do right now. Not dangerous in a frightening way. Dangerous because it would cause you to turn away from the very signal that is trying to guide you forward. A psychoid event is a moment where the boundary between inner and outer dissolves. Something happens simultaneously inside two people who may not be in the same room, the same city, or even the same time zone. Jung documented these events with meticulous care. He observed patients who dreamed the same symbols on the same night without any contact between them. He tracked moments where a psychological breakthrough in one person coincided with a measurable shift in another person's life, not through any mechanism the rational mind could accept, but through what he identified as the underlying unity of the psyche and the material world. And what happened to you 48 hours ago sits squarely in this territory. What you experienced was not a sign. It was a rupture, a place where the wall between his inner world and yours cracked open, and something that has been trapped on his side crossed into your felt awareness with a force that told you, before your thoughts could intervene, that this was real. That is why the feeling came without warning. That is why it carried a texture completely different from memory or fantasy. That is why it felt like something happened to you rather than something you manufactured inside your own mind. Something did happen to you, because something happened to him. But before I tell you what happened on his side of this rupture, you need to understand the mechanism that kept this shift from happening sooner. Because the shift did not arrive 48 hours ago by coincidence. It arrived because a specific psychological structure inside him finally reached the absolute limit of what it could contain. Jung described what he called the autonomous complex, a cluster of emotions, memories, and sensory imprints that lives inside the unconscious mind and operates with its own will, independent of conscious choice. Imagine it as a sealed chamber inside his psyche with its own atmosphere, its own gravity, its own internal clock. He does not choose to enter this chamber. The chamber activates when its threshold is crossed. When something in the outer world or in the body's own rhythm touches the wound it was built to protect. And for months, this man has been carrying an autonomous complex organized entirely around you, not around the idea of you, around the felt, visceral, psychoid reality of you, the way your laughter changed the air pressure in a room, the way your presence rearranged the chemical weather inside his chest, the way you made him feel something he was not prepared to feel and could not unfeel no matter how many walls he built, how many miles he created, how many rational stories he rehearsed about why stepping back was the mature decision. That complex has been active, firing in the hours between 2 and 4 in the morning when his defenses thin and the stories he tells himself during the day lose their authority. Firing when a scent passes him on the street that his conscious mind does not connect to you but his nervous system does. And suddenly his chest tightens and he does not know why, only that the air changed. Firing when someone speaks with a cadence that carries a distant echo of your frequency. And for a half second he forgets where he is because his body has traveled to a room where you once stood. He has not been free of you. He has been inhabited by a part of himself that knows what his waking mind refuses to acknowledge. And here is what you need to understand about why this matters for what you have been feeling on your side. You have had nights, and I know you have, because the connection that creates an autonomous complex in one person always creates a mirror response in the other, where you lay awake and felt him thinking about you. Not hoped, felt. The distinction matters. Hope is a wish cast forward. What you experienced was a reception, a signal arriving from across the psychoid field, landing in your awareness as warmth, as pressure, as the sudden inability to stop thinking about someone you were trying to stop thinking about. That was not your imagination inventing comfort. That was the autonomous complex in his psyche firing with enough force that the vibration crossed the field and registered in yours. You have been receiving transmissions from a chamber inside him that he does not even know is broadcasting. And 48 hours ago, that complex reached what Jung called autonomous activation at critical mass. The moment when the emotional energy stored inside it exceeds the ego's capacity to contain it. The sealed chamber did not just develop a crack. The door blew open, and what poured out is not something he can put back. If you are sitting with this and something behind your sternum is tightening, if you feel the strange, almost painful relief of hearing described out loud what you already sensed but could not prove to anyone, type the words, "His walls broke," in the comments. Not as performance, as recognition of a truth your body has been holding without words. Now here is where the complication lives, and I need you to hear me with both your hope and your patience active at the same time, because both are going to be required for what comes next. When an autonomous complex activates at this magnitude, when the suppressed feeling finally overpowers the architecture built to contain it, the conscious mind does not respond with clarity. It responds with disorientation, with a kind of internal vertigo, sometimes with what looks, from the outside, like the opposite of movement. Jung described this as the ego's emergency protocol against what he called archetypal possession, the experience of being temporarily overtaken by a psychic force so much larger than the ego that the person's sense of identity wobbles. The person does not think, "Finally, I understand what I feel." The person thinks, "What is happening to me?" And the thinking, the desperate attempt to regain intellectual control, can look from the outside like hesitation, like mixed signals, like contradiction. This is critical for you, because in the coming days and weeks, you may see behavior from this man that appears to make no sense. If you have stayed with me this far, what I am about to describe next is the piece that most people never hear, and it is the piece that changes everything about how you interpret what happens next. He may reach toward you and then retreat. He may send a message that feels loaded with meaning and then go silent for days. He may appear in your physical or digital space with an energy that is unmistakable and then vanish before you can respond. And if you interpret that behavior through the lens of rejection, if you read the retreat as evidence that the shift was not real, you will misread the most important chapter in the history of this connection. What you are witnessing is not rejection. It is a man standing inside a psychological event he did not orchestrate, did not consent to, and does not yet have a framework to interpret. The shift that moved through the psychoid realm 48 hours ago landed inside him not as a gentle whisper, but as a seismic reorganization. And right now he is trying to find his footing inside a room where every familiar structure has moved to a place he does not recognize. You might be thinking, if he truly felt something that powerful, why does he not simply come to me and say it? The answer lives in something Jung called the inferior function, the dimension of the personality that is least developed, least practiced, and most terrifying to access. For this man, the inferior function governs emotional exposure, unscripted vulnerability, the act of standing before another human being without rehearsal or defense and saying, "This is what I feel, and I cannot control it, and I am asking you to witness me in this uncontrolled state." That function has been buried under years, possibly decades, of conditioning that taught him emotional transparency equals emotional danger. And what happened 48 hours ago is dragging that buried function to the surface against his will. This is not a gentle process. Jung compared the eruption of the inferior function to a kind of psychic fever. The entire system runs hot, familiar defenses malfunction, and the person behaves in patterns that do not match anything in their normal repertoire. He may be more emotionally transparent than you have ever witnessed him. He may be more shut down than you have ever witnessed him. Both extremes emerge from the same root, the sudden, ungovernable surfacing of a capacity he spent enormous energy keeping underground, and the ego's frantic attempt to manage a force it was never designed to manage alone. When you feel the truth of that contradiction, that his distance and his depth come from the same place, type "I trust the unfolding" in the comments as a declaration of the rare kind of strength it takes to remain steady while something powerful rearranges itself beneath the surface. Let me take you further into what is actually happening inside him right now, because the more precisely you understand the interior landscape, the less his exterior behavior will confuse or frighten you. Jung wrote with great care about what happens when the psyche can no longer sustain a position that contradicts its own deepest truth. He called it a psychoid crisis, a moment where the gap between the self the person performs for the world and the self the person actually is becomes so extreme that the unconscious forces a correction. The correction does not arrive politely. It arrives as disruption, fractured sleep, inability to concentrate, a restlessness that has no object, a heaviness that has no visible source. The routines that used to fill the hours start failing. The distractions that used to work stop working. The person looks functional from the outside while something inside is being disassembled and rebuilt. That disruption is what is happening inside him at this moment. And here is the part that will reshape everything you have been telling yourself. The disruption is not carrying him away from you. It is carrying him toward you. Every hour of broken sleep is an hour where his unconscious mind reorganizes its priorities around the truth that you are not optional to him. Every failed distraction is a system that was designed to function without you, now breaking down because his deepest architecture has decided that functioning without you is no longer something it will support. This is love operating beneath the level of decision. This is an attraction that has crossed the border from preference into structural necessity. This is the psychoid realm doing what Jung said it does, collapsing the distance between what is felt and what is acted upon, between what is hidden and what is spoken, between what he has known in the silence of his body for months and what he has been too terrified to say with his voice. You might be asking when. When does the interior shift produce exterior movement? When does the feeling he cannot suppress become the conversation he finally initiates? When does the invisible become something you can touch? I need to be honest with you. The eruption of the inferior function does not follow the ego's calendar. It follows the rhythm of the psyche's own readiness. But what I can tell you with certainty is this: the activation that occurred 48 hours ago set a sequence into motion that cannot be reversed. He cannot return to the state he occupied before the complex fired at critical mass. The feeling that surfaced will not resubmerge. The dam broke, and water does not negotiate its way back uphill. What you will begin to notice, some of it within days, some within weeks, are what Jung called constellation events. Small, precise moments where the internal shift begins to leak into observable behavior. A message that appears after prolonged silence, not a long message, not a confession, but something brief and slightly awkward that carries the fingerprint of a man who typed and deleted 15 versions before sending the one that said the least but meant the most. A look that holds 1 second longer than it should when you happen to cross paths. And in that second, you will see something behind his eyes that his words are not yet brave enough to carry. A question he asks that has no connection to the surface conversation, and every connection to an unspoken need to understand whether you are still open, whether the door he retreated from remains unlocked, whether the energy between you still holds the charge he felt in the psychoid realm at 3 in the morning when his defenses finally collapsed. There will be subtler signs too. Signs that require the kind of attention only someone who understands what is happening beneath the surface can read. He may mention you to someone he trusts, not by name perhaps, but by description, by situation, by the feeling you leave in him that he cannot shake. That mention will travel. It may reach you indirectly, through a mutual connection, through an offhand comment, through the strange sensation of knowing you were discussed without being told. He may appear in spaces he would not normally occupy, not because he planned to find you, but because the autonomous complex is steering his feet before his mind can intervene. Jung called this unconscious arrangement, the psyche organizing external circumstances to match internal necessity without the ego's awareness or consent. You might also notice something shifting in yourself during this window, a sudden calm you did not manufacture, a morning where the anxiety that has been your constant companion simply does not arrive. A moment of clarity where you feel, without evidence, without reason, that something has changed on his side of the silence. Trust that feeling. It is not wishful thinking dressed as intuition. It is the psychoid field confirming what has already occurred in the deeper architecture. When you recognize that calm for what it is, type, "I feel the change" in the comments, because that recognition is not passive. It is participation in the shift itself. Watch for these moments, not with anxious, scanning eyes, with quiet, grounded, knowing ones, because when you understand the psychology behind what is unfolding, you stop requiring him to perform certainty before you allow yourself to trust the connection. You stop demanding proof in his vocabulary before you honor what your own body has been telling you without interruption. Type, "I see the signs" in the comments when you are ready to trust your recognition over your doubt. Now, I want you to soften your breathing for a moment. Let the noise of your day recede and allow me to show you something. Not as prediction, not as fantasy. As recognition of a future that is already assembling itself from the materials the shift provided. There is a moment approaching, closer than your fear would ever allow you to believe, where this man will be in front of you, and you will see something in his face that you have never seen there before. Not confidence, not charm, not the curated version he offers the rest of the world. You will see the version underneath, the one that surfaced at 3 in the morning when the autonomous complex overwhelmed his defenses and he sat in the dark with your name pressing against the inside of his chest like a second heartbeat he never asked for. His voice, when he speaks, will carry a texture it has never carried with you. Not heaviness, but earned depth. The depth that only comes from a man who fought against the truth of what he felt, lost that fight, and is standing in the aftermath not with defeat, but with surrender. And what he says will not be eloquent or rehearsed. It will be simple and imperfect and slightly shaking, and it will be the most real thing another human being has ever offered you, because it will have been forged through a process he did not choose but could not escape. The shift that occurred 48 hours ago is the reason that moment now exists in your timeline. The psychoid realm moved. The complex activated beyond containment. The inferior function erupted through decades of suppression. And what is traveling toward you now is not hope, it is consequence. The natural, structural, irreversible consequence of love that was too real to stay hidden and too powerful to remain unspoken. When you feel that future settling into your body as something more than wish, as inevitability, type, "It is already here," in the comments. Because in the psychoid realm, it is. The physical world is simply catching up to what was already decided in the deeper field. Here is what I need you to carry with you through the coming days. Do not chase the shift. Do not try to accelerate the process with messages designed to test whether he has changed or questions engineered to extract a confession he is not yet ready to give. The inferior function erupts on the psyche's own timeline, and external pressure does not speed that timeline. It triggers the ego's defensive architecture back into operation, and that architecture is exactly what the shift is in the process of dismantling. Your power in this moment is not located in action. It is located in presence. In the quiet, immovable signal you broadcast simply by remaining grounded in your own life, your own rhythm, your own value. He can feel that signal. Not through words, not through logic, but through the same psychoid channel that delivered the shift 48 hours ago. Your stillness is not passive. It is the most potent force in this equation because it communicates to his unconscious mind without any distortion. She is not afraid. She trusts what is real. She does not need me to perform resolution before she believes in what we are. That is the energy that dissolves the remaining distance. That is the energy that gives his inferior function permission to keep surfacing instead of retreating. That is the frequency that transforms the invisible shift into the visible reunion you have been carrying in your chest for longer than anyone around you knows. And I know something about you that you did not tell me. You have been holding this longer than anyone has witnessed. You have been patient in rooms where no one saw your patience. You have smiled through conversations where someone asked about your love life, and you gave the easy answer because the real answer lives in a place too deep and too tender to offer casually over coffee. You have maintained hope when the visible evidence said, "Let go," and something deeper, something in the foundation of your knowing, something beneath thought, beneath reason, beneath the stories your mind tried to construct, refused. There were days when you almost convinced yourself to walk away, days when you rehearsed the speech you would give your own heart, explaining why it was time to close this chapter, and every time something stopped you. Not stubbornness, not desperation, something quieter than both, something that felt less like holding on and more like being held. That refusal to release was not naivety. That was the psychoid realm speaking through your body before this message ever reached your ears. That was the same field that ruptured 48 hours ago telling you, in the only language it uses, this is not finished. This was never finished. This is becoming what it was always going to become. You did not imagine the connection. You did not exaggerate its significance. You did not project feelings onto someone who felt nothing. The autonomous complex living inside him, the one that activated beyond containment 48 hours ago, is made of you. Your essence, your imprint. The shape you left in his psyche that no amount of distance or silence or rational argument could smooth over. You are not waiting for something uncertain. You are standing at the edge of something that has already been decided in the realm where decisions of this magnitude are actually made. If what you have heard resonates not as new information but as something you are finally being given permission to believe, share this message with someone who needs that same permission. Not as content, as a bridge between what is felt in the body and what is understood by the mind, carried from your awareness to another soul who has been waiting in the same silence you know so well. To continue receiving these messages at the moment they are meant to arrive, stay close. The next message is already taking shape inside the same field that delivered this one, and what it carries may be the piece that completes the picture your heart has been assembling in the dark. Type, "The shift is mine" in the comments as a final act, not of claiming, but of alignment, of trust in a process that was already in motion before you pressed play, and that will continue long after this message fades from your screen. You are held. You are seen. And what shifted 48 hours ago is still moving, directly, inevitably, irreversibly toward you.